did like that, where we brought in the soil conservation specialist from the Pueblo Zuni. We had staff from a number of the tribes working with us to actually focus on an area that we could do some preservation work to stop some of the erosion that we were seeing. And it was the first of many. We've been working with them for a long time, but you can tell that that was taken from a videotape. We actually were using video then. But it was a great project, and many of the check dams are actually still working. But I have to admit that we don't always get to do things in the field. A lot of times we end up being in interminable meetings, and our colleagues are pretty good sports about it all the time. And really, the engagement levels have increased over the years to the point where it's an everyday occurrence for us. And we've been working on a number of projects. This is some of the work we've recently done for the our Grand Archaeology exhibit, which is over at Kolb Studio right now. Or Kolb, sorry, it's at M&A, it was at Kolb this summer. This project was one that we actually started looking at the archaeological sites in the canyon in the early 90s. All of the tribes that we work with helped develop the strategies for what we ended up doing in terms of excavation. And part of the project was also bringing them in to look at the materials afterwards so that we could include their interpretations in the exhibits, in the interpretation for the archaeological reports. And it's small things sometimes, like this vessel down here. As an archaeologist, you say, hey, this is great, we found all the pieces. But in talking to the tribal scholars that we work with, they said, no, don't put it back together. It would be inappropriate. It's like, okay, so we didn't. We left it as it was, but it's those sorts of things that obviously there's some reason not to, but as an archaeologist we say, well, we got glue and we can fix it, but that's not the right thing to do. And it was important for us to be able to bring folks in from all the tribes actually to help us with that determination. Some of this information you will see if you go to M&A, and the exhibit will be up until August. If you haven't been to it already, it was up at Kolb this past summer. But we spent a bit of time in the exhibit talking about listening to the descendants, and again, bringing people in to help us with the interpretation. And it's important to pass on that legacy as well, because you've got a mother and daughter talking about things so that she's passing on information to her daughter, as well as us, to help us understand better and to be educated about this. So it's an important aspect of what we do, and it's one of the things that keeps what we do alive. Working together is the only way we can actually be successful, and it's something that we have done, well, for 20 some odd years, and it's something that a lot of places haven't done. And I was actually surprised in talking to some of my colleagues that what we've been doing wasn't sort of the norm. And certainly it comes through in our discussions with the tribes, that what we've tried to do in every aspect of working in the park is a little different. Sometimes it's labor intensive because we ask a lot of our colleagues, but it pays off in incredible benefits. Sometimes those benefits are reaped in unusual places.
Okay. So needless to say, Jan has way better stories than I do, but hopefully I can at least share with you some of my experiences over the last few years and some of the projects we've been working on. So we just love these photos, so we decided to put them in and are going to talk a little bit about something that we hadn't really planned on. But these two pictures were taken at a restaurant in Sarasota, Florida area after a NAGPRA review committee meeting in October of 2009. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, NAGPRA is the acronym for the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, and we're working under that law to repatriate some human remains and funerary objects that are still in the park collection. And when I came on board in the spring of '09, I had some experience with NAGPRA, and I started looking through the files and seeing where the park was at, and kind of spearheaded a little piece that hadn't been dealt with yet, which was to repatriate what are called CUI, culturally unidentifiable remains. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. Which are remains that we can't associate with any particular tribe. So we worked with all the tribes and agreed that the Havasupai would be the most appropriate tribe to claim those. And we asked then Vice Chairman, and actually again now Matthew Pudasoy and Diana Suyukwala to go with us to Florida. And both they and the superintendent made formal presentations to this NAGPRA review committee. And it was really, really effective. The committee really complimented the presentation and then provided their recommendation, which was, yes, we should work with the Havasupai on this repatriation. And within the next year or some amount of months, we were able to have a successful repatriation and reburial of those human remains. And since I had been at the park really not very long when all this took place, personally, I feel like that really helped build some trust and cement my relationship of working with the tribe, with that particular tribal council. So we wanted to throw that in there and at least tell you about that. So here we have some 1939 design plans for an area up at the South Rim in the village area called Supai Camp. As probably many of you know, the Havasupai were forced out of Indian Garden in the late 20s and by the early 30s. But the government did create a housing area up in the park, and I think the idea for the government's perspective anyway was probably giving people a place to live where they could work up on the South Rim and the kids could also go to school. So they had a lot of plans, as you can see here, for building many cabins and structures. We have now we have a long-term government-to-government kind of agreement for the use of this area, and that agreement acknowledges the long-term use and occupancy of the South Rim area and this area. I believe that first agreement was signed under Joe Alston, former superintendent, maybe around 2000, 2001, even though this camp had been there. But most recently, Steve Martin, our former superintendent, signed an agreement, an amendment to the original agreement in 2008 that allowed for a 50-year extension. And of course, the plan is to always continue to extend that. Unfortunately, the plans never really happened, and only 4 cabins, I believe, original cabins were completed around 1932. And they didn't have any running water, by the way. Around 1950, some more materials and labor were donated, and a community building was built that eventually became a housing unit itself. I think around 1962, a bathroom facility was built, and around 1980, the BIA added a room to that, which was a shower facility. But none of the cabins had running water. They're very small. People had a lot of attachment to them, though, and still do. So this is some of the older traditional housing, some historic photos from down in the canyon, and a photo that's an old dwelling that's up on the rim. And the top one on the right, I think you see a person there. So that was how it looked in use, and the larger picture, how it appeared when it was recorded as an archaeological site. So this is how the camp looked. Those are the cabins I've been talking about, and this was prior to 2010. So when Steve Martin came on and was able to get some Recovery Act money, and the tribe was able to get some money, the tribal council, the tribal housing office, and our park management planning team worked to develop some plans. And the first plan was to build some new units. And so now up there are 3, these are being brought in, modular units. They're duplexes, they're handicap accessible. They were brought in. The tribe requested some modifications to the space inside the modular units, which was adjusted. We worked with the tribe going over things like, and agreeing on the paint color, the roof materials, the flooring, the countertops, certain things. The park kind of took the lead on that aspect of the project. Let me just check my notes, sorry about that. I want to make sure I'm covering everything here. So then we move. So here's a comparison of one of the new duplexes near one of the old cabins, kind of a neat photo. The next phase of the project was led more by the tribe, the Tribal Housing Office, and that was the rehabilitation of the historic cabins. So the cabins were slightly enlarged. Plumbing was added, finally. Can you imagine? These cabins have been in constant use since they were built in the 30s. Somebody has always lived in them, but they still didn't have plumbing until about last year, actually. So they now have plumbing, and but they still look, on the outside, look pretty much the same, which is great. So they have their historic character. I guess one thing I wanted to point out is the Havasupai tribe fought quite hard during the negotiations leading up to the 1975 Grand Canyon Enlargement Act. They wanted this area, the Supai Camp area, to be part of their official reservation. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So this is actually in the park, on Park Service land. The park owns the houses, but there is this long-term agreement. The tribe decides who lives there, makes their rules for the local area, and we try to stay out of their business. We leave them alone, we respect their sovereignty, their privacy, and only when we need to, if there's a problem that arises, we would first go to the tribal council and alert them that we had heard there might be a problem and leave it to them to resolve. So it's been a really great project that brought people together, a lot of appreciation, as you might imagine, from the tribe to Steve Martin and the park. This was the ribbon cutting ceremony for the new duplexes when they were completed, and some of the key people that were involved. And it was, yeah, really a really nice project to come into and be able to help with a little bit and see what a positive outcome there was. There are, I guess I'll backtrack a second and just say, because the area did not become part of the reservation, there are some elders who, you know, still struggle with that. They resent that, and it's frustrating for them. And that comes up occasionally in the meetings, but we managed to, you know, do our best to just move beyond that and work together. But that's the reality as well. So in the mid-90s, the park started working on a general management plan. Part of that plan had a component of transportation planning. If you recall, those of you who spent a lot of time up at the South Rim, when you know, drive in and go to that old Mather area, there was a tremendous amount of car congestion. People would park all along the main road, and then they'd kind of just tramp through the woods to get to the rim view. And so the park, for a long time, had wanted to deal with that and had come up with a lot of different options. This overview that you see here and the new 4 parking lots up there is what's what it looks like now. So I came on board in the spring of '09. I think this was the very first project Jan asked me to work on. It was already obviously underway for the big plans, but I was asked to start getting meetings together with the tribes to include an artist, a stoneworker named Andy Dufford, who'd been hired, and to talk to tribes about how we could best introduce a tribal presence in this area to the millions of visitors that come to Mather Point. So we had a lot of meetings that summer of '09, and in fact we were able to take Andy, when a spot opened up, on a river trip with us, a consultation river trip. So he was really immersed not only in the canyon, but in the canyon with some of the tribal representatives to really begin to get a sense of how important the canyon is to the tribes. And on that trip, and in the meetings we had, that's where a theme of the canyon is home came out. That was through those consultation meetings. These slides are representative of some of the earlier planning that went into the design, the discussions, and then of course actually doing some of the stonework there. And I don't think you can, I'm sure I don't have a slide on this, but in some of these earlier versions, we actually listed all the tribes by name. We ended up with doing it by culture group instead. And all the tribes were consulted all along the way and agreed to the final design. Fortunately, like even here, I think Wallapai is spelled wrong, and somebody caught that. And so, you know, there were a lot of stages to this.
The stones up on the hand-drawn one?
This one? Oh, down here, that's right.
The hand-drawn one. The one that Tesla one?
Which I can't even see from here, but yeah. The guy from the Navajo Nation gave an idea of some constellations. Yeah, there were a lot of different themes, of course, themes of water, the canyon steps, etc. But ultimately, we ended up with the final that looks like this, which we're really proud of. And that's Diana Sue from Havasupai performing a blessing at one of the events we had there. And these next couple of slides are either from various, the Mather dedication or the blessing at the, we call it the medallion, or just some community events. And one of the, you know, we entered into this thinking about the visitor. How do we educate the visitor about the tribes? And the really amazing outcome that I think none of us really anticipated, but has turned out to be, is that the tribes themselves, as you know, when they're here, talk about now their special connection to this place and their ownership of the space. And that's been really, really rewarding. And people have used words and talked about how now, just with this simple addition, how welcome and invited they feel and how they feel really a part of it, which of course it's their traditional homeland. You would hope that they would, but you know, with all the development in that area and all the visitors, that hasn't always been the case. We're not completely done in this general area. While we're done with the medallion for now, a lot of other interesting ideas were generated in those consultation meetings, and we hope at some point we're going to get more money, we're going to do some other projects and continue to represent that tribal presence in this area. Let's see if we can do it. We have another video clip here for you.
The place that the public refers to as the Grand Canyon is perhaps among the most significant places for all of the Hopi people, simply because our emergence stories refer to the canyon. And also in our belief system, it is also our final spiritual home, which our spirits go to when we pass on in this life. Well, part of what we hope can contribute to the experience of many people who go down into the canyon is to recognize the reverence that many tribes hold for the Grand Canyon, and that includes the Hopi people. And the fact that the Hopis consider this a very, very special place should be recognized by the visitor because of its significance to a living culture. And this living culture still holds in reverence this place we call or the Salt Canyon in the Hopi language. So as visitors go down and experience the canyon, you will find evidence that Hopi people indeed lived here, in terms of the archaeological evidence, in terms of some of the petroglyphs, pictographs that Hopi people left down there. So the presence of the Hopi will never end as far as I'm concerned. I think probably one thing I would also like to encourage all people to acknowledge is really the management responsibilities of the National Park Service and their work with the Hopi tribe in trying to protect the importance of the canyon for others to enjoy. So I encourage all visitors to carefully acknowledge that the Park Service has a pretty serious responsibility on behalf of all of us, Hopi people and others. The Grand Canyon is very special to all of us, to all people, Hopi and others who go into the canyon. And as the traveler proceeds into this journey, I hope that we can all appreciate this wonder that someone created for us to enjoy, to hold special, and also to revere the canyon for what it is. It is a testament to the awesome place we call Earth.